Today we're going to be talking all about hydrangeas, all the different types of hydrangeas to make sure that you choose the best one that is going to perform exactly the way you expect it to in your landscape. Every year we have tons of people coming to the garden center and wonder, how do I get my hydrangeas to bloom? How do I have better, more beautiful hydrangeas in my landscape? So we're going to cover that today. We're going to go through different varieties and give you all the information you need to be successful. All right, so the first hydrangea we're going to cover in this video is the Arborescens type hydrangeas. These guys are absolutely spectacular. I've got a bunch of these planted in my landscape at home because look at that bloom. Look how big that is. These are the type that you think of that are like a big snowball, really round in shape. And the really cool thing about the Arborescens type is they're gonna bloom on new or old wood. You know, if they're getting too big in the landscape, they're looking a little unruly, you can go in and you can trim these guys down to just a couple inches from the ground, and they're just gonna branch out and thicken and look even better in the landscape. And so the Arborescens are really one of the easiest. The biggest thing is they're really gonna be happiest in the shade. So if we're getting a few hours of sun in the morning, a few hours of sun late in the day, that's totally fine. They're actually gonna do great with that. But in the middle heat of the day, we definitely wanna have these guys protected a little bit. Because what they'll do, they won't die in the full sun, but they're just not gonna look happy during the day. So you're gonna go out in the middle of the day if it's in full hot sun, and it's just gonna be wilting and looking sad. And what they're doing in that situation is they're actually just heat stressed. So they're gonna wilt just because they're hot and upset. So if we can get them somewhere in the shade or filtered light or a little bit of sun in the morning or late in the day, absolutely fantastic spot for these guys. You get tons of these huge blooms on them. The other thing about these type is when the bloom is done and that bloom looks tired, you can go in, you can cut the plant back, and a lot of times they'll send out new growth and end up sending out another flush of blooms later in the summer. This is one that comes into bloom in your landscape around the end of May, beginning of June. That's when these guys are coming into full bloom. Mine in my landscape at home right now, just the other day, opened up full bloom, are going nuts right now, looking absolutely spectacular. So the Arborescens is a really fun hydrangea that if you got a good shady spot, I think you're absolutely gonna love because they just give you so much color in the landscape. All right, the next type of hydrangea we're gonna talk about is Macrophylla. The Macrophyllas, all of you and my wife, everybody seems to want the Macrophylla hydrangeas. These are the ones that are going to give you the pinks, the blues, the purples. You go to the East Coast, upper Northeast of the United States, you're going to see these everywhere performing awesome. Here's the thing in Kansas City, these can do really well here, okay? And they absolutely just so much color, huge round blooms, absolutely gorgeous. This is one of the trickier hydrangeas, but let's talk about how you can be successful with these guys. With the Macrophyllas, definitely want shade, okay? We do not want to have these guys in sun. If they're out in full sun, they are just going to sunburn. They're going to be heat wilting. They're just going to be sad. So Macrophyllas want to be in shade. The next really important step on these guys is they bloom on old wood. So what I find a very common mistake people make with their hydrangeas is pruning them at the wrong time of year. A lot of people get out in their landscape in early spring and they want to start cutting stuff back and cleaning it up before everything breaks dormancy and starts coming to life in the spring. If you do that on these guys, you're not going to have blooms come summertime. So this is one that we really want to be careful about when we're pruning it, making sure that we're not cutting off the blooms for this season. But more importantly than that is, a lot of times if we don't protect the crown of this plant in the wintertime, they're gonna die all the way back to the ground. They're actually gonna come back up from the roots for the most part, and then we're just not gonna have bloom. So I have a lot of people come in the store and they go, gosh, when I bought it last year, it had all these blooms, it was gorgeous. It came back up this year and it's just a gorgeous green bush, but there's no blooms. So the thing with the Macrophyllas is, what we wanna do in the wintertime is after it goes dormant, we actually want to take a bag or two of mulch and just almost make a mulch mountain on top of the crown of this plant. And if we can just bury the crown of that plant in 1 foot to 1.5 feet, 2 foot of mulch, high and wide, that's going to really insulate the core trunk of that plant through the winter and help it so that it doesn't die all the way to the ground. What we're going to do then in the spring is early March, early to mid-March, we're gonna pull that mulch back, and then we're gonna let that plant come out of dormancy. And what you'll see is rather than coming back from the ground, it's gonna come off the old stems. That's how we're gonna get blooms on our Macrophyllas. A lot of people too have questions about, well, I've got a pink hydrangea, I want it to be blue, or I got a blue one and I want it to be purple, right? So there are things we can do to affect the color of some of the Macrophyllas. Not all of them are able to be adjusted, but there are things we can do on a lot of the Macrophylla varieties to make them either go pink or blue. Now that doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes people come in and they go, it's got pink blooms today, but I really wanted it to be blue. Well, we're not gonna be able to change that for this year. And the reality is, it's not even really gonna change much for next year. We could put different nutrients on there to start the transition to a blue hydrangea for next year. But what's gonna happen next year is it's gonna be more of a purpley color probably. And maybe the second or third year after, if we keep putting the correct applications on it, we can get it to become then a blue hydrangea. All right, now we're gonna talk about probably the biggest category of hydrangeas, the most popular type of hydrangea, and really, to be honest, the easiest type of hydrangea. That's gonna be the Paniculata type hydrangeas, okay? Tons of options in the Paniculatas. You got some that are only 2 to 3 foot tall and wide. You got some that are 6 to 8 foot tall and wide. You've got blooms that are white. You got blooms that are green. You got blooms that are white and go to pink, kind of a blush color. So within the Paniculatas, there is a vast range of options that perform really well in the garden. The cool thing about these guys is they're gonna bloom on new or old wood. We don't typically wanna do a ton of shearing on these guys, but you can kind of shape them back up and they'll still bloom really well. Here's the thing with the Paniculatas. They're actually gonna be a lot happier getting more sun. So typically we recommend a Paniculata type hydrangea here in the Midwest is in a minimum of 5 to 6 hours of direct sun. If you put this guy in all day shade, it's really just not gonna perform the way you want it to, and you're just not gonna be happy with the results. So let's make sure with the Paniculata type, we wanna put those out in lots of sun. As you can see, these guys are coming into bloom. These are a little ahead of what's naturally gonna happen in the landscape. Typically, we're gonna see these guys start coming into bloom more around the beginning of July, where right now we're at the beginning of June, but you know, from the grower side, they're usually gonna be blooming a little bit ahead of season. But these guys then are gonna bloom all summer long. You're gonna have blooms from now until frost, right? So like I said, a lot of them are gonna be a white or a green, and then some of them will fade into a blush as the blooms age, which is absolutely beautiful on these. These do have a more conical shaped bloom, whereas your Arborescens, your Macrophyllas have more of that snowball round bloom. The Paniculata types are gonna be more of a conical shaped bloom, but there's just gonna be massive amounts of blooms on these. The blooms are absolutely huge and look gorgeous all summer long. Again, it's a great option for something in the sun. If you need a shrub in the sun that's gonna bloom all summer, the Paniculata type hydrangea are a great way to go. Some of my favorites are Bobo. If you want a really good white one that just holds its white color really nice through the season, Bobos are fantastic. About a 3 to 4 foot tall and wide plant, gonna be very manageable and appropriate size in the landscape. Then you've got some other varieties like Quickfire Fab, gonna be more in that 6 foot tall and wide range. Those are gonna have some really great pink blush tones as the blooms age and get spent. So really great varieties in the Paniculatas, a ton of applications in these. They can be rowed up as like almost a hedge. You can tuck them in for interest throughout the landscape, but everybody should have a Paniculata type hydrangea in their landscape. I think you'll absolutely love it, but lots of variety to choose from, any size you need. All right, here I am standing in the middle of some gorgeous Oakleaf hydrangeas, also more on the Latin side, a Quercifolia hydrangea. These guys are just a really cool hydrangea. Let's get down here and check these out. So the Quercifolia or Oakleaf hydrangeas, they have that, it looks like an oak leaf, right? So a totally different look to the leaves on these guys. The blooms are also really long, conical shaped blooms. These guys are one of the first ones to bloom in the landscape. So these start blooming back in May, usually towards the end of May. These guys will kick into bloom, followed by your Arborescens, and then your Paniculatas and Macrophyllas will be a little later on into the summer. But with your oak leaves, The cool thing is there's, again, multiple options on size. There are some of these that will be up to 8, almost 10 foot tall and wide. So, I mean, it can really create almost a screening effect. If you got a really shady backyard where you want to kind of screen the neighbors, these can be a great option. Now, they are deciduous like all the hydrangeas. They're going to drop their leaves in the winter time. But if you're wanting some screening in the summer, some of the big types of Oakleaf hydrangeas will do a phenomenal job for you. These guys also get the best fall color of all the hydrangeas. These guys will have really those reds and oranges and yellows into the fall color on the leaves. The blooms, you can see here, have that white. There'll be a little bit of blush pink into the blooms as well. But again, the size on these guys is really spectacular. Those blooms are extremely showy. And then the leaves, I've got one of these in my backyard. It's every bit of 8 foot tall and wide. And I mean, I will have leaves on that plant the size of a dinner plate. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, the Oakleaf hydrangeas are one that definitely want to be in shade. So we don't want to put these guys in too much sun. They can take a little bit of sun. So if you get a little bit in the morning, a little bit late in the day, that's going to be fine. The middle hot sun in the middle of the day, that's when we want to make sure that these plants are in a more shady, protected spot. And so that way they're going to perform the best. These guys, we really don't want to do a whole lot of pruning on them. Typically, we're just going to go in there when the blooms are spent and they don't look good anymore. You can just go in, snip them off, clean them up. If you need to shape the plant up a little bit, that's fine. It might hurt some of the blooming the next year if we do that too late though. So just be conscious of that. But if you need something in the shade that's going to fill a huge space, give you tons of color in the summer, these are extremely reliable bloomers and are going to do exactly what you expect them to in the landscape. All right, well, this one here, it'd be a mistake if I didn't tell you about Hydrangea petiolaris. This is climbing hydrangea, okay? So very different than the shrub hydrangeas, but I had to bring it in to talk about it. You can see this here is your just standard climbing hydrangea. It's got that beautiful green foliage on it. But here's the thing, these guys bloom very differently than your shrub type hydrangeas. They're gonna have a more open, airy bloom, but a really fantastic climber for a shady spot. They actually will cling onto a concrete wall, onto a tree. I mean, you can get this to pretty much climb up anything, okay? So a very aggressive climber in a shady spot and will give you blooms. Spectacular. I also brought this guy. So this is Miranda, which is another variety of climbing hydrangea, but you get those variegated leaves as well as the blooms on there. Really spectacular plant. This has honestly been a really popular plant the last few years. A lot of people in shady spots want something to climb over a trellis, climb up the side of a structure. And so this has been a really great option for people that are looking for a vine in the shade, and you get the blooms late spring through early summer. Absolutely spectacular type of hydrangea that everybody should be planting one in your yard. All right, so if you really love hydrangeas, but you want to venture out and do something a little more unique and interesting, there's also the hydrangea tree. These guys are really fun. The way they grow these is actually super interesting. They start with a little tiny sprig in a pot, and they actually put a cylinder, like a tube, around that. And so they force the plant to grow tall. When they get the trunk to the height they want it, they chop it, and then it branches from there. So these aren't grafted or anything like that. All you're gonna find in the trees is Paniculata type hydrangeas. So again, types that need more sun. But most of the types that they're gonna put into this form are going to be varieties that are gonna be in that 3 to 4 foot tall and wide range. So you've got your trunk, you're gonna have this plant another 3 to 4 foot tall and wide on top of that trunk, and you get those spectacular blooms. So let's say you've got that spot in front of your house that everybody seems to have. You got your garage, you got a little sidewalk going around to the front door, and you've got this weird pie-shaped bed in front of your house. This would be a really fun plant to have right in the middle of that as kind of a showstopper centerpiece in that flower bed. Then you could put flowers or perennials around it. But these guys, again, being a Paniculata type, are gonna bloom all summer. So all summer long, you're gonna have those gorgeous blooms all over this plant. When those blooms are spent, we're just gonna do a little bit of light cleaning and tidying up on that plant and just let it go dormant then for the winter. But overall, a really cool plant, a huge showstopper in the landscape. If you don't have one, you should definitely try it. So as you can see, there's tons of different types of hydrangeas, tons of options to choose from, different bloom colors, different bloom sizes, different plant sizes. So about anything you could want in the world of hydrangeas is out there as an option, okay? But some really important details we need to make sure that we're all on the same page with on how to be successful with your hydrangeas is we're gonna need to make sure we understand watering, pruning, fertilizing. So let's dive into that real quick. So when we plant these guys, a lot of people think, oh, I just put this little baby plant in the ground, and they wanna go out there every day and water the plant because it's a little baby in the ground. No, we don't wanna do that. Here's the thing, is when we plant these guys, we wanna deep soak them. So right after you plant them, you put your hose on a trickle about the width of your pinky finger right at the base, soak that baby in for 45 minutes to an hour. Give it a really deep soak. Then we want to make sure that we let it dry down at least 2 to 3 inches before we water it again. So if we're planting, let's say in the summertime, and it's already pretty hot, sometimes you'll find with hydrangeas, they will heat wilt, especially when they're freshly planted. So sometimes people come in and they go, it just every day it's wilty and I water it every day. Well, you can just be adding fuel on a fire. We want to make sure that we check the soil before we water it because it could just be heat stressed. And if we just keep dumping water on it, we're going to rot those roots and ultimately the plant's not going to make it. So make sure that you're checking your soil before you water them. When you water them, deep soak them in really, really good. Okay. Once they're established, the second, third years, you really shouldn't have to worry a whole lot about watering like most of the rest of your landscape unless we're in a drought. Okay. So a very tough, hardy plant for our area. The other thing is going to be fertilizing. Okay. A lot of people don't fertilize ever, or at best, maybe they fertilize things once a year. What I'd really like to encourage you with is look at the blooms on these. They have tons of monstrous blooms on there. Well, those blooms are consuming energy from the plant, okay? And so they're using a lot of energy. They need a lot of nutrients. And so most important thing is gonna be, we need to fertilize every fall. After the plants go dormant, we wanna give them a nice slow release feeding. So that way they have the nutrients they need come spring to wake up and push out and look gorgeous for you. We also want to fertilize as they break dormancy come spring. So sometime in April when they're starting to push out leaves, that's a great time to get in there, do another slow release feeding. Lastly, we need to talk about pruning again. Make sure we're all on the same page with that. Your Macrophyllas, we do not want to cut those back. We just want to mulch them and insulate the crown of the plant. We want to pull the mulch back then when they break dormancy and let them wake up and do what they're supposed to. Oakleaf, we also don't want to do a ton of hard pruning on those. We want to pretty well just clean off the spent blooms at the end of the season and then leave them alone. Your Paniculata types, we can prune those or not. They're very versatile. They're going to bloom on older new wood. So just a light shaping is typically all you really want to do on those. But if you do get one that's a little unruly, go ahead and give it a good haircut as they're starting to break dormancy in the spring. And that'll allow for it to push out and be a nice bush again. Okay. So that's everything I have for you guys on hydrangeas today. It is hydrangea season. Come in and see all the varieties we have. Come see the pretty blooms. And let's put some hydrangeas in the ground this year, people.